want to replace the strings on my guitar, and I got to thinking about the whole string changing process and started wondering if I was going about it correctly. When should I change my strings? With all the choices out there, which strings should I use and why? Was there a right way to install guitar strings, or at least a better way than I've been doing for all these years? I didn't have the answers to these questions, so I called on a friend, Christopher, over at Kozad Guitars. Christopher, glad I found you. I'm in the middle of a string crisis. Do you think you could help?
I can fix that.
How often should I change these strings?
Assuming that there's nothing structurally wrong with your guitar and the guitar is properly intonated where the notes sound accurately up and down the fretboard, change your strings when you can no longer keep these strings in tune, no matter how often you retune them. And if you like that bright, fresh sound of new strings, then when your strings start to sound dull, it's time to change them.
Which strings should I buy?
Well, let's start at the start. You need steel strings, not nylon strings. You have an acoustic guitar, not an electric guitar. And you have 6 strings, not 12 or some other number.
Wait a second. It's pretty obvious that I have 6 strings, no offense, but could you be a little bit more specific about that?
Let's look at some of the details of guitar strings in order to understand the options that are out there. Each string is secured to a small metal wheel. And when you buy a set of steel acoustic guitar strings, some of the strings may have an additional wire that's wound tightly around that plain steel core. The gauge of a string is its overall diameter, measured in thousands of inches. Typically, heavier gauge strings are wound with that additional wire as opposed to the lighter gauge strings. Various predetermined combinations of heavier and lighter strings are assembled as sets. And when you think of them together, you'll have extra light sets and medium sets and heavy gauge sets.
Well, how do I know what set to get? How do I know what gauge to get?
It's all about tension. And the larger the diameter of the strings, the greater the tension. And that tension is pulling one end of your guitar towards the other. A medium gauge set of larger diameter strings can exhibit 175 pounds of tension.
Why select one gauge over another?
Well, generally speaking, lighter gauge strings are going to be easier on your fingers, but different guitars have different energy requirements. So pairing the gauge of strings with the energy needs of your guitar, while of course respecting its structural capability, is going to be crucial to realizing your guitar's sonic potential.
Wow, that sounds pretty cosmic, man. Does that mean I should avoid large diameter strings?
No, not at all. You just want to ensure that your instrument is up to the task, withstanding that extra force that the higher tension strings are going to exhibit. Weigh the risks and the benefits. Generally speaking, lighter strings are going to be easier on your fingertips.
What's energy requirements? What does that mean?
Okay, so the string is plucked. Kinetic energy travels across the saddle, down into the bridge, out across the top of the guitar, the soundboard, to the edges, and like a wave in the ocean hitting the shore, it ripples back across the top. Those standing waves are primarily responsible for what we perceive to be the sound of a particular guitar. You have to have sufficient energy to generate the waves necessary to create the sound. The quality of that sound is going to be determined by several factors, like the materials that are used in the bracing and how careful the builder was.
Is the quality of the sound, is the guitar alone responsible for the entire range frequency you hear?
Well,
do the strings play a role at all?
The strings do play a role. The composition of the metal wire used for the winding around the steel wire core dramatically affects the overall tone of the string. It's going to sweeten what would otherwise be a steel string sound. Two of the more popular wires in use today are 80-20 and phosphor bronze. Those are labels for their particular alloys of metal. The 80-20 strings are 80% copper and 20% zinc. That's a combination that forms one of the world's oldest alloys, better known as brass. The addition of zinc makes the metal stiffer, stronger, more corrosion resistant than pure copper would alone. Brass strings are yellow gold or golden yellow, and they produce a relatively bright sound, especially when new. Trumpets and French horns are made of brass. Bronze is another alloy that's made predominantly of copper, but bronze incorporates tin in lieu of zinc. It adds corrosion resistance. Steeple bells are made of bronze. Orchestral crash cymbals, cymbals used in drum kits. Phosphor bronze adds a trace amount of phosphorus for improved wear resistance and stiffness, with a composition that's more like 92% copper and 8% tin with just a trace amount of phosphorus. Phosphor bronze guitar strings have a reddish brown hue.
You're starting to sound like the scientist guy, but you said brass is brighter, right? What do you mean?
Well, the perceived brightness of 80-20 strings or brass strings is largely due to their scooped mid-range frequency response. That's going to result in greater presence of bass and treble frequencies. By contrast, phosphor bronze strings have a more present mid-range, which results in an overall warmer sound. Both 80-20 and phosphor bronze strings are still predominantly copper. They're subject to tarnishing. Assuming the strings are kept clean, free of grime and sludge, the metals are going to oxidize and deteriorate over time. They're going to lose both their luster and their frequency response. So if you like that new string sound, you're going to be changing your strings more frequently.
Well, I heard there's coated strings out there, and that seems like something I would like because I think I don't have to change them as much.
You're right. Coated strings are sheathing the metal inside a thin polymer. As a result, we don't expect them to begin life having the same presence that their uncoated siblings would have. However, though they won't start out initially as bright as uncoated strings, they'll tend to maintain their sound longer. So coated strings are going to cost you a bit more, but they last a lot longer. That's why they're so popular. Coated strings are not going to have the same presence of uncoated strings, but your uncoated strings are going to lose that presence more quickly because of tarnishing. So you'll change the strings more frequently. Coated or uncoated, 80-20 brass strings have a bright, more trebly sound. You're going to typically love or hate. Phosphor bronze are going to be the warmer, more mid-rangey sound. You're going to love or hate.
Well, from what you just told me, my well-informed decision, I feel like I'm making a decision now. I know myself, I'd probably benefit from a light gauge coated phosphor bronze string. What do you think?
I would agree.
You're not going to believe what I bought.
Let me show you how to install these. So your guitar is built having a pinned bridge. The ball end of the string is inserted into a tapered hole in the bridge, and a tapered pin holds or pins that string in place so that the ball end doesn't pull out. Let me show you a close-up of what's going on inside the guitar. The ball end is inserted into the bridge, and if instead of catching that metal wheel on the rim of the bridge plate, if you'll orient the ball end so that the radius of the wheel is rolling against that bridge plate, you'll mitigate fracturing the wood of the bridge plate and prematurely wearing it.
Yeah, that's where you orient it. I got it. That's how you want it?
I want it like this.
I got it. Perfect. Okay.
Take a look at the profile of the string that we removed from the bridge and notice how it's bent.
I see that bend in there.
We could just take a brand new string, insert it into the hole in the bridge, pin it in place, and when we pull the string forward, it'll bend. But that won't ensure the orientation of that ball end. So what I like to do is to pre-bend that string in the direction of the wheel. Just bend the string. So we've bent the string, the ball end is oriented correctly. We insert the string, pin the string in place, keep the string taut, and now what? I found a third hand, a capo or capo, can hold that string in place while we work to secure the string on the machine head post. So let me show you two ways to secure the string. Both ways require the same amount of string, and both of these methods require you to thread the string through the hole in the post. For the first method, pull the string taut, and if we begin to wind now, we will have too short of a string and the string will slip out. So we're going to need some extra string. How much extra? About 2 inches of string. You can simply note a point about 2 inches beyond the post, pull the string back to that point, thread the tail of the string to the inside of the headstock, and underneath the string, holding it tight against the post, wrap it up and over the string. The string is secure. And now we wind the string to the inside, keeping all of the winds below the hole in the post. Once the string is tightened, we'll trim it. So for the second technique, we're going to do the same thing, threading the string through the hole in the post, but instead of just beginning to wind it, we need that same 2 inches. This time, the 2-inch mark is where we clip the string. We pull the string back, leaving about 1/8 of an inch of string sticking out beyond the post. And we begin to wind the string to the inside, and we hold the string up above the tail as it passes over the tail, then push the string down as you continue to wind, and for the next wind, it passes below the tail, and all subsequent winds are below that. You'll notice I started with the first string. I would continue with the second string, the third string, and then I would begin again with the 6th string, then the 5th string, and then the 4th string. If you want to start with the 6th string, your next string to install would be the 5th, then the 4th, Then jump back to the first string before installing the second string and ending with the third string. It will keep your strings and your hands from colliding.
Is that the A string you're putting on now?
This is the fifth string, and in standard tuning, it would be tuned to A.
Okay. And you're putting one over and then the other one's underneath.
Exactly. Make certain that the pins are well seated, but don't break something here. Make sure that the strings are well seated, that those ball ends are up tight against the bridge plate and the pins. Tune to pitch, and these should last you a long time.